Welcome everyone to this live stream. We are going to be joined in a few minutes, hopefully, if he hasn't forgotten, Larry Johnson, who we did have on the show a few days ago, but then he disconnected. His entire internet was taken down. But no, he's here. We've got Larry with us. Yeah, we wanted to have a proper stream and one that was uninterrupted. And I'm delighted that Larry's able to hear, so I'm just going to bring him up.
Hi there.
How are you?
Yeah, good. We got screwed by Frontier. That was my provider the other day, and it just went and didn't come back on for about 10 hours.
Oh, right. Okay. So I thought there was some, deeper, meaningful issue behind it. But yeah, happy Easter to you if you celebrate.
To you.
Yeah, I think it's Passover for some of my viewers also shared that. So happy Passover. I don't know if that's what you say, but yeah, Larry, it's good to have you back. My goodness, what a day it's been. Apparently President Trump is praising Allah now.
On Easter of all things.
I know. I want to jump into that with you in just a second, but some of the other headlines I've seen in the run-up to waiting for you to join was the IRGC are now declaring a sort of new order in the Strait of Hormuz, that it will, quote unquote, never go back to what it was before, which, I mean, I'm not necessarily the IRGC's biggest fan, but you can kind of, why would they ever accept the status quo or return to the previous after Trump's unilateral threats and everything else that he's been talking to NATO and everything else as well. But I'm just kind of curious, if you were looking at the media today and seeing his tweets and his general mental state, I mean, I think the guy's losing it.
Yeah, no, his what the cheese has slipped off the cracker. He is, there needs to be an intervention. Somebody needs to show up at the White House with a white coat that has long arms, put him in the coat, tie the arms behind his back, and then take him to a nice facility, feed him some pudding. Somebody promise him he can have McDonald's cheeseburgers, all he can eat, and then put on Fox News and just have him sit there and watch. Because his outburst today with respect to, calling them, the particular use of the F word, he's dropping F bombs and calling them crazy. And it's like at that point you go, hey, Donnie, look in the mirror there, man. I think you're doing a little bit of projection here.
But that's the thing, isn't it? He's been dropping actual bombs, but now he's dropping figurative ones as well. And
it was so panicked, where he demands. Here's the quote: "Open the fucking strait, you crazy bastards, or you'll be living in hell." Well, I don't exactly think they'd count what the experience of the last 8 weeks. You realize we're now entering the 8th week of war. We were promised there was going to be a 3-day affair. We're now going on 2 months. And, he has made Iran a living hell already for many of the people. But his notion that by threatening like this, he's going to get a reaction from the Iranian government that will somehow placate him, that ain't gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, I made a literal raw video a couple of hours ago. I usually edit my videos, got a script. I didn't. I had like 5 or 6 bullet points, and I just spoke. Okay, I had to re-record a couple of times because I just was yelling in my frustration about it. But for me, it's not only about what he's saying; it's about what his followers say. The willingness that they are to go to justify or validate what he's doing, right? Yeah. They are rewarding him. They are encouraging him with this behavior, and I find it, to be honest, quite terrifying, because this guy is the most powerful man in the world. He's commander in chief of the most powerful military. He has access to nuclear weapons. what is he just going to think, well, I've said the F-bomb, well, I might as well use another type of bomb in Iran because I'm not getting what I want, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, from your experience of working in the CIA and State Department, like.
Well, actually, this is as unhinged an outburst that I've ever read about or heard about or now actually witnessed from any president in our lifetime. And I'll put it in my lifetime, because I've been around a lot longer than you have. So going back 70 years, we've never seen anything this bizarre. And then, when he concludes that by and praise be to Allah, it's like, what?
Well,
I mean, are you
on
trying
that.
to insult the Muslims, or what are you trying to do?
Well, the argument that some people on, I don't know if you use Twitter, but some of the people who responded to my tweet, which reacted to his truth post, whatever, was simply that this is all part of a strategy. He's trolling. It's all part of a deeper, clever,
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And okay. So let's follow that line of thought. And what does this accomplish? The trolling, to insult the Iranians. Well, so you insult them to what? Make them angry? Well, tell you what, they're already angry. Or insult them, or heap such verbal abuse on them that you think they're going to surrender. Are you crazy? Yes, no, I'll answer that question. Yes, he's crazy. Donald Trump has lost touch with reality, and we've heard before his threats. You do X, Y, and Z by this weekend, or else there'll be hell to pay. He made that threat several times to Hamas, and Hamas didn't respond. So, go ahead.
No, I mean, it's. I want to get your take on some proper things, but for this, I've got so many thoughts running through my head. I'm trying to rationalize what he means by praise to Allah. Even one of the first comments we've had on the stream so far is, what does that mean? And some of the comments by his supporters were simply, he's not meaning it literally praise to Allah. He's meaning it sort of, you need to praise Allah because of what we're going to do to you. But why frame it in that way? Why insult the Iranians, as you say, if you're going to want to try to achieve that? It's not going to lead to that result, is it? And I'm wondering now, is he just going to start obliterating the rest of the country? Because as I'm sure you've seen and have said on other colleagues' channels, the Iranians have largely come to realize that this bombing campaign is really not doing good for the country. They don't support it anymore. And sending them back to the Stone Age, as Pig Hegseth said, 2-3 days ago? I think the last time we were talking. That's not a way to talk about the country you're trying to liberate, quote unquote.
Yeah, well, it is. It is an exaggeration about how much damage the United States and Iran can inflict on the United States and Israel can inflict on Iran. It's a big country, and you can drop lots of bombs. They'll devastate certain areas of the country, that's for sure, but not broad swaths. And if they're hoping, if they were hoping to create enough destruction that there'd be pressure for the Iranian government to reach a deal with the United States, that ain't happening. That is not going to happen, and they better get away from that. Well, what's really interesting is Trump's still toying around with this whole idea, are we going to put boots on the ground or not? We've already done that. They just did it yesterday. They had, there was a combination of SEAL Team 6 and the 75th Ranger Regiment that were deployed near Isfahan. And whatever operation was going to take place, it got called off.
So do you think that that's the special forces trying to acquire the uranium? I think that was the ultimate. What we saw, all this hoopla surrounding the rescue of this downed, they call him a U.S. airman. Usually in that F-15, the one that sits in the back seat, what they call the weapons system officer, is usually a lieutenant, a young pilot, or maybe a captain.
an Air Force captain, not a Navy captain. This guy was a colonel, okay? Just for those not familiar with military rank, you start at lieutenant, then you go to captain, then you go to major, then you go to lieutenant colonel, then you go to colonel, and after that comes generals. So this was a very senior, and we don't know if it was Air Force or if it was Army or if it was Navy, because the Navy, the 06, they're numbered. A colonel is an 06. Also, a Navy captain is an 06. We don't know who was in the back of that plane, what the F-15 was doing.
But why would a colonel be in a F-15 conducting military strikes in Iran? Why would a colonel of senior rank do that?
He may have been in charge of the overall operation, and that was a plan. And they were going to use that plan. He was going to first assess the situation himself to see what the prospects were for being able to successfully carry this off. What's fascinating is the whole combat search and rescue was carried out by U.S. Special Operations Forces that normally do not carry out such missions. In other words, you normally will have people, assets dedicated to rescuing downed airmen. But that doesn't mean that it falls upon, in this case, they claim it was SEAL Team 6 that did it. We also know that at the site where this guy was supposedly recovered, they lost 2 C-130s. And the C-130s, they do a number of things. They can, I believe they can carry a Little Bird helicopter on board because there were 4 Little Bird helicopters, which are flown by Task Force 160, which is a Special Operations Air Regiment, SOAR. They were out there along with these 2 C-130s that got caught. So we don't know if the C-130s brought the helicopters or if they actually brought in a Ranger battalion or portions of a Ranger battalion, maybe a Ranger company to seize an airfield. Then they lost 2 Pave Hawks, which are like the Black Hawk helicopter, souped up. They took fire and were trailing smoke. One of those may have actually been the one that grabbed the pilot and then got hit and getting out before they had a chance to recover the so-called weapons officer. And then they lost an A-10. I mean, they lost and 2 Predators. So they lost a lot of air assets. The total cost on that around, close to $400 million. And then you still got to step back and say, why are the Navy SEALs doing this? Because usually the rescues are carried out by PJs, they call them, pararescue jumpers. Within the entire panoply of Special Operations Forces, you got the Tier 1, normally associated with Delta Force or SEAL Team 6, as well as Task Force 160. But I tell you what, the PJs, in terms of their training, they're probably the highest skill level of any special, surpassed Delta, surpassed SEAL Team 6 in terms of they're trained to be both medics, to do combat medicine, they do both parachuting and swimming. So they meet the qualifications that Navy SEALs do and the Delta Force does. It requires a level of extreme intelligence and capability and fitness. And so those are the ones that should have been rescuing this pilot. Instead, SEAL Team 6. Now, again, a lot of these details just don't add up. So we're not being told the true story about what happened.
I don't think we ever would be. It's a part of the reason I think Trump has also gone as lunatic-y as he has is because he was pretty mute over the situation, right? When it became apparent that the jet was downed,
Right.
he didn't have many comments to say about it. And I think that's because how can you try to make up a narrative around that? It's an embarrassment, and Trump is, with the ego that he has, not exactly going to be able to sort of claim a win over that. So
Right.
I think he's then coming out of this being, he's agitated, he's frustrated, he's whatever, and so he says the things that he says in the Truth Social because he's losing control of it.
Yeah.
Do you? But I guess as someone who's worked in your position as long as you did, what would have happened if the Iranians had captured the other pilot?
Well, they would have taken him prisoner. There were claims that they were going to torture him. The Iranians don't do that. They would have treated him fairly. They would have filmed him, but they're not going to do any violence, beat him up, because they're smart enough to understand that if you start abusing an American prisoner on television, all you're going to do is further enrage the Americans that right now may be sitting on the fence as far as thinking this war is a stupid idea. So, but it would have been, you're not old enough to remember when the hostages were taken in Tehran back in 1979, but that kicked off a TV show that was called Nightline with Ted Koppel, and it didn't initially feature Koppel, but they started off with day one, then day two, day three, and then it became a thing. So they every day looking for more information, more update on the fate of these hostages, and it could have turned into that kind of thing with this guy had he been captured. So I think it's almost like they had planned this raid, and then the raid, instead of compromising it, they decided just to take the capability, divert it, and use it for the recovery of this individual. But again, still don't know why. Why is a colonel flying in the seat that is normally occupied by a young lieutenant or young captain?
And I guess the thing that, well, actually, just on your point about hostages and that, it makes me think of Operation Nimrod, if you're aware of that. Obviously, my English background, for people unaware, in the 1980, just after the Iranian Revolution, there was a notable, it was the first time that the SAS or special forces were used in public by the British government. Thatcher, who'd just won the election the previous year, decided to send in this special group of forces to take on the, I think it was a small separatist group within the Iranian community, the revolution. And it was a demonstration of just how to try to deal with these sorts of things. But the Trump administration doesn't have such an approach. They seem to just be going in there hoping for the best, putting an unnecessary amount of assets and personnel at risk. Do you think that this can get worse, given how much more Trump's willing to sort of strike, what did he say earlier in his post, strike bridges, strike plants, right? I think he's given himself another imposed deadline or something.
Well, he says it. We've got several cases where he's made similar threats and hasn't followed through. And so we can be hopeful that this is another one of those cases. It is, he's not inspiring confidence in other leaders around the world. He's raising concerns that he may actually be suffering a mental, some sort of mental decline.
Do you think he's going through a sort of a Sleepy Joe version?
Oh yeah, I absolutely do. I think he is now mentally impaired, and it's a different kind of impairment. And actually, you see this in many older people. There is when you're in your 20s and 30s, if you've got normal brain function, you always know sort of there are things you can say and things you shouldn't say. You may think them, but you don't blurt them out. But once you get to a certain age, and I saw this with my mother when she turned 83, she became much more brittle and much more would say things out loud that normally she would never say, things that were insulting or whatever. And that's what I think we're seeing with Trump. He's 80 or 79 going on 80. He's just saying some, crazy stuff.
Do you think he ever came back from the attempted assassination? I think there's a lot of people that speculate about that just permanently.
Yeah.
Over the edge. I guess what I'm also curious about for your perspective is what this does for the other side. As someone who's worked in intelligence, I'm very wary of how the IRGC are going to be taking this, because Trump's effectively revealing his hand. He's showing that he has no strategy, or he's just completely reactive and so easily manipulable. No?
Yeah. Well, knowing what he said, I would immediately begin working on boosting air defense systems around those sites across the country. I would ask the Russians for assistance, and or the Chinese, maybe even to the point of having them send their own units and setting up to assist us. Because now it's going to set up, either Trump's going to do it, and no matter, it's unlikely that he will be able to do anything, or that our military will be able to do anything that will so cripple, so damage Iran that they'll give up the Strait of Hormuz, which is the implication of why he's doing this. I think it could lead to greater embarrassment for him, and just remind Pete how weak he is. So this, on the other hand, he's going to, at a minimum, spark, if he follows through with it, it will be a retaliatory strike by Iran across the Middle East. So if they take down bridges, they're going to take down bridges in Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. So there are bridges to fall. So this could just get further inflame the situation.
When we were chatting 2 days ago and you were rudely interrupted by your internet cutting out, one of the things that we were touching upon is the extent to which the Iranians are, I won't say winning, but they're in a much better position than a lot of people would like to claim. Mm-hmm. As time goes on, how is your assessment evolved in that?
I mean, Iran is weakening the U.S. hold on the Middle East. Iran is making it more difficult for countries like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. Those are the two big ones that have been the strongest aligned with the United States. And now forcing them to have to actually reevaluate, is this relationship with the United States still in their interest? The Saudis are much closer to making a decision on that than the UAE, but UAE is completely screwed. They have no future now. Their country is going to disappear into the bowels of history.
They've been attempting to keep people on side by offering them no tax or whatever. The crypto bros, finance bros, and stuff like that are not as attracted anymore to Dubai. So, okay, so you think Emirates is going to disappear? What about Qatar? What about Saudi Arabia?
No, actually, Qatar is playing it smart. Qatar has stayed in actually on pretty good terms with Iran, both by virtue of having hosted Hamas negotiators in the past and kept them safe, despite U.S. and Israeli attempts to kill them. Bahrain, it'll probably again become part of Iran. Kuwait will probably be taken over by Iraq. I think Kuwait will cease to exist, and then Saudi Arabia, they're gonna have to make some. They have to do some serious ass kissing with Iran, because if they try to stick with just the United States, it's a losing hand for them.
Well, I'm kind of curious then, because what some people have argued is that while Iran is outlasting the US and Israel, they're not going to be okay from this. There's still going to be a lot of internal damage. And that Mujtaba, the son of Khamenei, we don't know his mental state. We don't know how he is. And therefore that Iran's effectively going to become IRGC governed. And so it's more like a police state. So it's going to internalize, it's going to be more focused on its issues at home than it is about the broader Middle East. Do you see it differently then?
Well, no. I mean, look, Iran has never been one to go try to meddle in the affairs of the other countries in the region compared to the meddling that they've done with respect to Iran. The Ayatollah Khamenei, the new one, the Mujtaba Khamenei, a very interesting cat. He was not. You could argue he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth by virtue of his father. Was seen as a successor to the Ayatollah Khomeini. But when Mujtaba turned 17 in 1987, so just do the math. He was born roughly 1970. He immediately went and enlisted in the army, in the IRGC, actually, to be precise. And he fought in combat for the last 2 years of the Iran-Iraq War. So that's where he established his cred. He's got tremendous credibility with the IRGC. So he's not, he's not one that's going to be at odds with them. But by the same token, the demonization of the IRGC in the West is such that they ignore that there is not a big split between the IRGC and the regular army or the militia, the Baji. So this, the fact that you've got a leader that's actually, fought in combat, I think the last British prime minister that actually fought in combat was Winston Churchill. I don't think you've had another political leader that had actually been into combat. U.S. Presidents since 1960, JFK. He was a naval officer and became famous for the PT-109 incident. And then George H.W. Bush, he was a Navy pilot. So those two, and that's relevant because both of them, even though they got embroiled, Kennedy, it was in the early days of Vietnam, and Bush with the attack, responding to Iraq's attack on Kuwait, which the United States helped provoke, unfortunately. Both went out of their way to keep the war from expanding, not becoming some permanent engagement. Whereas, it didn't matter their the successors, the Bill Clintons, the George W. Bushes, Barack Obama, then Biden, and now Trump, have tended to get the United States involved with wars they can't win.
I mean, this is what confuses me about the Iran war is it's only an aerial campaign. Well, until now, with the points you mentioned about this special operation in Isfahan, which I haven't seen mentioned anywhere. Do you have any about that? Because I haven't read anywhere about that.
Yeah, no, it's just you look at where they were, and they had this this airfield that was identified. So there was they didn't build it. It wasn't built by special operations personnel, but apparently whoever did the site survey didn't do a good job, because those planes, when they would reach the end of the runway and try to turn around, they got stuck in the sand. Now there was another. So there's some confusion out there. There was another C-130, I believe, that was shot down. That was not part of these two. But it's tough to tell, because when you look at the wings, the pictures that are out there showing that damage, clearly that the wings had been shot up, not that they had taken shrapnel wounds on the ground. So I just, by virtue of my background and my experience, you don't, when they're touting, oh yeah, SEAL Team 6 did the rescue. That doesn't make sense. That's why you have PJs, the pararescue jumpers. That's what they do. SEALs do other things. If he was being held hostage, then yeah, maybe they'd bring the SEALs in to do a hostage rescue standpoint of you doing close quarter battle and shooting shooting the people holding him. But again, that wasn't the case.
So then the question comes to mind is, what on earth took down the jet in the first place? There seems to be a lot of speculation about what Iran has that's able to shoot down the F-15. Iran, I think, claimed it was brought down by air defense systems.
Yeah, well, they've got two things. They've got a loitering munition, so one that's like a glider,
Right.
that just or like an older drone that's not flying real fast initially. It's just hanging out, but it uses an infrared homing system until it finds something, homes in on it, and then goes get it. And that they've actually been pretty effective with that. It's called an Ursay 7. So an Ursay 7 is what they call it. It's actually got, I think, a different designator within the Iranian crew. So it is that it has been very effective. It's taken down now probably 30 aircraft and drones. I know they're at least on number 17 with the drone. And they also do have some ground systems now. So they had not been very effective during the first first month and a half of the war, but now it looks like they're becoming more and more effective.
Well, it makes me think of that incident. It wasn't shot down by the Soviets, but the U-2 plane that was shot down over Russia. It was in 1960. And that's a huge embarrassment.
Gary Powers, and I think it was 61, because Kennedy was in office then.
Yeah.
It originated out of Pakistan and then got brought down, and Powers was supposed to kill himself, and he didn't. So he avoided protocol on that.
But wasn't that one of the occasions where it revealed some very advanced technology on behalf of the United States?
Yeah.
So in this regard, are there assets that we don't know the Iranians have?
I think we're starting to learn. So it is. I think there was some initial questions about how important or how capable the Iranian systems were, but then after the first 4 or 5 weeks, then they came to the conclusion, I think, in U.S. military, that is no longer we didn't have to worry about it. Now, in the last 3 days, they're coming back and saying, "Oh man, we got to worry about this. This is significant."
And so if we continue to see Trump up the ante in his rhetoric, are we going to see more of this happening? Like, how many more aircraft do you think will be shot down? How many more incidents of this type will happen before the US government decides it's time to call it quits?
It's just going to be a function of how many airstrikes we put over there. I think Iran is now in a mood to bring down as many as they can. And, we thought we had, as Trump claimed, we had air supremacy. They can't touch us. Well, you know what? When you go out and say stuff like that and then you get your plane shot down, you look pretty foolish.
You said we're 6-7 weeks into this stuff now.
So we're now 8. This is week 8. We're on the start of week 8.
Week 8?
Yes.
We start on February 28th. Yeah, I suppose.
28th, and then 7, 14, 21, 28, and then March. Let's see.
Second, first,
6, 7 weeks.
Okay, well,
but I counted it up on my calendar. It was coming out. Let's see here. Just come back and do it again. That when you look at it, so from February 28th to 7, that's 1 week. 7 to 14, that's week 2. 14 to 21, that's week 3. Right? Then 21, 28, 4. 28, 20 to April 4th, 5. Yeah, so we're on the 6th week now.
Yeah, I like this. You're that's transparency, right? Accountability live. You're counting for everyone to see exactly what it is. But
so,
I guess no, go on.
No, yeah, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask then. So, what does this mean for Iran's capacity to outlast them? Right? What does this mean for their ability to just? They don't want to end the war. It seems Trump seems to be pushing for talks, and they're just like, no, we don't want to. Don't need
to. So my assessment's predicated on the assumption that Iran's production of ballistic missiles takes place below ground. And as such, as long as it's below ground, we can't really touch that. And we will never know exactly how many they're producing unless we are able to get a spy on the inside to count and let us know. So assuming that they've got basically an unlimited supply of ballistic missiles, this could easily go on for another 2-3 months with no problem. And what you're going to run in here to in a month is it's going to become blistering hot, at least in the Persian Gulf, blistering hot. We're talking 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So it gets brutal hot, and so that's going to start having some effects on equipment and such.
Well, what does that mean for? Well, no, but can you be more specific about that? What does it do to American equipment like that? I mean, one of the aircraft carrier I know is being repaired because of a fire. U.S. assets are being generally, I think, quite undermined across the Middle East. Iran wants them out completely now, right?
Yeah. So you've got to find, like, if you're using aircraft, you got to figure out, get them into a hangar. Do they have enough hangars now for all the aircraft they have over there, or are they having to park them out on the ramp? But if you're parking them outside on the ramp and it's 120 degrees, and then you have to work on those planes, and you can't work on them out. If you work on them outside, you're gonna burn yourself. So it's just the weather will create some additional challenges for both equipment and personnel that maintain that equipment.
But is U.S. equipment fatigued under that kind of heat? Do we have the capabilities to put up with that kind of intensity?
Well, it's not just U.S. It's all military equipment. When you're using something over and over and over, particularly with F-35s, they start breaking, and then you got to start fixing them. And so the longer they're used in this way, at a high ops tempo, the more likely it is that you're going to get breakdowns.
But the strategy by America and Israeli, I mean, the claim is, those I speak to on that perspective, is that
Well, you broke up there when you spoke to who?
Oh, okay. That was
okay. You're back.
It was it me this time? Oh, okay, I'm being my internet's about to go down. No, all I was trying to say is that the Israeli strategy, the American strategy, is to try to take out as many of the launchers, as many of the production facilities, to destroy their supply chains to such an extent that they can't sustain their defense, they can't sustain this deterrence,
right,
etc., etc. Is that complete nonsense because of?
Yeah, they're underground. They're underground, and we don't have the ability to blow them up. And when we talk underground, sometimes they're 800 meters down, okay? And so they're not having to bring the missiles up to the front, put them on a launcher, and drive them around. A lot of times when they do that, that's just a decoy. Because at the same time, the air defense supply for the United States and Israel, it has been depleted. It is now, they're now, I will assert, they are now empty. The only other thing they'll have coming online is whatever Lockheed Martin will produce in the next month. And they'll produce roughly 8 of the THAADs, and they'll produce, let's see, the total 50, let's call it 50, they'll produce maybe up to 60 PAC-3 missiles for the Patriot. So, and then that gets used up almost immediately because all Iran is now firing ballistic missiles that aren't being intercepted. The Israelis' supply as well is diminished, and they've got even worse capability than the Patriot.
Well, I mean, what is an interceptor? $4 million a piece? $3 to $4 million?
It depends. So the Patriot goes between 4 to 6 million just for one missile. And so you got to use two of those. So anywhere from 8 to 12 million to bring down a $50,000 drone. That doesn't make any economic sense. The THAAD is more like 12 to 13 million a piece.
12 to 13 million, really?
Yeah. Yep. And then when they use it, you got to fire two of them.
I mean, I've read some reports that Shahed drones could be as cheap as $20,000.
Yeah,
20,
yeah.
The Russians have been doing that themselves since they reverse engineered in that. So I mean, what does that do for the? I mean, your time working again in the intelligence services, right? When you've got 18 different agencies saying that the war in Iran was a bad idea. I think it was 18.
Well, yeah. Well, look, the 17, the so-called 17 U.S. intelligence agencies, but only really 4 of those are actual collectors, people who actually collect intelligence. Everybody else are just consumers. So what do I mean by that? The CIA, it generates human source reporting. DIA also generates human source reporting. From it, it's got defense attaches assigned overseas. You've got State Department messages that come back in cables, so that's a form of human reporting, but it's in official channels. You got NSA, the National Security Agency, which collects phone calls, emails, text messages. And then you've got the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, and they're more into collecting electronic signals. But so it's basically those 5. So they're the ones that actually collect intelligence. Everybody else can weigh in. They'll read it and can make their own assessment about what they want to believe. I don't know if that helps make sense of this.
No, it does. I mean, I lived in DC for a few years. I may have dated a couple of people in the intelligence communities one time or another. It wasn't privy to certain information, but she gave me an insight into sort of some of the intricacies. What interests me, though, is sort of agencies like Chemotics or NGOs, the ones that have relations with some of the agencies, I forget the other main one, DAI, I think it is. And a lot of these tend to be on the ground sometimes operating, but they can be also covers for covert ops. Is that right? Or is it's not like we see in sort of Jack Reacher and all those sorts of series and stuff?
Well, there are, for example, so CIA is a collector, and then, as I pointed out, DOD is an intelligence collector. But most of the reporting that comes out of DOD comes out of Defense Intelligence Agency. That said, they've got a number of other organizations under the auspices of DOD that, its original name, it was called ISA. And
really?
International Security Agency. Yeah. And all that is it's sort of a military version of the CIA, using case officers, operators in the field. So an example, during the first attempt to rescue hostages in Lebanon back in Iran back in 1980, members of ISA were inserted, went into Iran to be able to make the behind-the-scenes arrangements to affect the rescue. Get cars, get transportation, get let people know where where the hostages were located, communications, whole variety of things like that. So you got U.S. has some pretty robust intelligence assets, but the key is always, can you get anybody on the inside that's going to tell you the straight truth?
But isn't that what they did with the initial strikes on Khaname and the Inner Circle? They had some informants, so to speak.
Yeah. I think they got that from Mossad.
So who's more at play here, Mossad or CIA? Or it doesn't really matter who sort of they were.
It depends. I guess it depends on the issue. In this case, in working in Iran, Mossad, I would argue, has much better assets. They've had a longer working relationship with groups like the Mujahideen al-Khalq, MEK, and the Baluchis. CIA's reach with the Baluchis, they're on the far eastern end of Iran. That goes back, oh my God, 47 years. So a long relationship with them. They were helpful in providing information about the U.S. hostages in Tehran back in 1979, 1980.
Just as a tangent, one of the incidents I find most fascinating, which I think involved Mossad quite a lot, was the Vila incident. If you know what I'm referencing.
Which one?
The Vila incident.
Okay, not familiar with it under that name.
Vila incident is, I think it's in the late 70s, when there was this tremor off the coast of South Africa. Basically, a lot of people believe it was a nuclear weapon being tested, but the South Africans didn't have the technology. They had the materials, but they didn't have the know-how. So the Israelis, who wanted to refine their nuclear capabilities, worked with apartheid South Africa to test this nuclear weapon. In the US, surveillance systems picked up, registered these waves. But I think a lot of that had to do with the intelligence services of Mossad and such. So anyway, nerdy bit of historical anecdote.
Yeah.
I guess, I could talk to you for ages, but I am conscious it is, an Easter Sunday for you. So I will wind down, but I'm kind of curious what you think this means now for the key pressure points.
Well, I'll draw a boxing analogy to Muhammad Ali when he used rope-a-dope. Iran is Muhammad Ali. They're letting the United States punch itself out. We keep throwing airstrike after airstrike after airstrike, and then you run out of targets. Now what do you hit? And again, why are you doing that? You're doing it ostensibly, not just to kill people, but to persuade the Iranians to say, oh my God, we've had enough of this. We can't stand this. We give up. That's not going to happen. So what's going to happen is at some point, the discontent in the United States is going to grow. And there's going to be political pressure for the United States to get the hell out.
Yeah, but over what time scale?
Probably, I would say in a couple of months, we'll see the real movement against, maybe quicker than that.
Didn't we have an anti-King movement, just a few days ago in the US across the country? So, but what does that mean for his internal command and MAG and the
well, that's what's one of the driving forces, according to Time Magazine, a recent report, that they're now realizing that they're in real trouble for the midterms, and they've got to try to turn it around now. So we'll see what Trump does. We'll see if he makes the adjustment or not.
They've only just realized that?
Yes. Oh, yeah. You think, are they really that clueless? And the answer would be yes. Yes.
And what does this mean for, I don't know, Israel then? Because in my mind, regardless of whether or not the Iranians and Americans come to a deal or the US has to pull out, Tel Aviv is going to continue this, right?
Yeah. They've got the Zionists have a lot of influence down here. And Byron Donalds, he's running for I think the Senate seat, or is it senator or governor? I forget which, but he's a diehard Zionist. You got others, Marco Rubio as well, and the Florida has a law in the statutes that requires it to invest X amount of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in Israel. So there are people who are now starting to get upset with that, and we'll see if that turns into anything.
But if the Democrats win a lot, we're just going to see a continuation of the status quo in some way. I don't think they'd be wanting to go to war with Iran again, but I don't think there's going to be a significant shift in foreign policy over the Middle East.
Well, you got to ask, what are you trying to accomplish? And as you made the point earlier, air power doesn't do it. So you say, okay, well, how about ground troops? Yeah, you can theoretically talk about ground troops, but the fact of the matter is you'd need about 3 million. And to put that size of force together to go in and take control of Iran, where you're going to really cause regime change, it would be a 2 to 3 year process at a minimum.
But can you realistically think that there's any willingness for Trump to accept a defeat? How would he try to spin this?
Oh, they will declare. We saw a hint of it today. Trump was reporting that Iran has now. Iran no longer has a nuclear weapon and is committed to not building one. Yeah, that's been their position for the last 40 years, okay? But now Trump's touting it as if I've extracted this concession from the Iranians, so now we're in good shape. So that could be his off-ramp. He says, we've secured Iran, we put our own troops in there and this nuclear plant to look and say there's no nukes. So we're going to leave. We're going to get out.
Okay, so right. So they try to, as each one does, claim a win. The Iranians can claim that they won, well, because they've not been ousted and destroyed and decapitated or whatever. But the Americans can claim that they've effected enough of a regime change that is genuine.
We stopped Iran from getting the bomb.
You set it back sort of a few years.
Oh, no, they'll come out and say, we got a commitment. And no, in fact, Iran might be willing to give a commitment, but it would be coming through China and Russia, either one or both, that they will guarantee that there will be no more, that Iran will not build a nuke. Well, everybody gets to back away. That gets the Israelis off the hook too, because they can no longer say, "Oh, we got to stop Iran because they're going to get the bomb."
Well, I mean, Iran's been considered a threshold power for a long time, right?
Well, just by virtue of having a nuke.
And then from there, what about therefore I mean, a lot of people talk about the Russians and the Chinese. You talk about the Russia-Ukraine war quite a lot. I'm curious what you think the extent the Russians are involved in this.
I think they're extensively involved, particularly providing intelligence. They signed. There was Russia, China, and Iran signed a trilateral security agreement on January 29th of this year. So they've now formalized the kinds of cooperation that are going to be extended to each other, and how the mutual cooperation is going to be used to bring about, peace and security and throughout the entire Southeast Asia, West Asia region.
But does Russia have the bandwidth for that? They're so focused on the war in Ukraine.
Yeah, I think they can walk and chew gum at the same time. They've got the war with Ukraine is progressing as they wanted to, very just continuing to significantly degrade Ukraine's military capabilities. So, and then they can still supply weapons as needed, advice. Because remember, in the early days of the war with Ukraine, the one who was supplying what we now know as the Geran drone was Iran. Iran came up with that, shared it because Iran got it because they had downed a U.S. drone similar to that in like 2012, 2013. So the Iranians updated it, and then shared that technology with Russia. Now Russia's gone and updated it even more. They've got some that are jet powered. So, there's mutual sharing going back and forth.
I mean, that's interesting. The jet powered, I haven't heard of that. But to the extent to which the Russians would be willing to support Iran, because they were signatories to the JCPOA, whether or not, what your thought is on that deal. But I got the impression that the Russians didn't want Iran to be nuclear capable, or they had reservations about how far they wanted it to be more powerful.
Yeah, well, Iran has generally been of the mind that, they'd prefer to limit nuclear proliferation. And, so Iran would go along with that, I think. The only thing that could change is, there is going to be a push among some saying, if we had a nuke like North Korea, the West would stop bothering us. Maybe that's true, but that would, if Iran announced that it was building the bomb or it had built the bomb, that's going to create a real uproar in the region.
But that is also a huge concern for the countries that have the weapons and don't want them. I mean, China, some people, I think I said this last time we chatted, they're a status quo power in the sense that they benefit from the status as it is, the international system as it is, and therefore they don't want big potential ruptures or disruptions like Iran being nuclear capable, even if they are strategic partners.
Well, but they also look at it. They're benefiting now significantly from Iran's new status by controlling the Persian Gulf and what goes in and out. The Chinese now are getting paid in yuan for oil, and it's shifting away. They just opened. They had a new bonds issued with Deutsche Bank that is apparently attracting a lot of investor interest, and it's moving investors out of U.S. dollars into the Chinese currency. So what all this means is that China is benefiting somewhat economically from this war that is being waged. So they have lost some investments. And there's some investments they have in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, United Arab Emirates. But at the same time, it's now refocusing the financial institutions on China. So it's starting to break free of dollar dependency.
Yeah, there's definitely been a decoupling from the dollar and bilateral trade. The Russians, the Chinese do it a lot now. But is that enough to assert the United States as the reserve currency yet? I think.
Well, that's where it's headed. That's exactly where it's headed. So
okay.
Hey, well, I'm gonna have to bail out here in about. I've got another hit in about.
No, I just wanted to say thank you very much, Larry, because we're reaching the top of the hour. The last question I think all of us wanted to know was just simply where you got your shirt from.
This is I buy Tommy Bahama is one brand.
It is Tommy Bahama. I knew it was Tommy Bahama. There you go, everybody. The most important question of the conversation. But thank you, Larry. It's been an absolute pleasure, everyone, for watching. We'll be back soon next week. Well,
all right, Peter. Hey, thanks so much, and
thanks a lot,
enjoy your time where you are.
We will do. Thank you, Larry. Okay. I'm going to stay on just a minute. Take care, Larry.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Well, that's it, everyone. That was Larry Johnson. I appreciate that's who you came to watch, but I just wanted to stay on for a second and debrief. If you're new here, this is a channel that looks at things from a comprehensive perspective. I try to, I'm English, but I'm also Russian, so I try to incorporate both sides of that. And I think there needs to be a big shift in the way that the West foreign policy conducts itself. I think Larry's had some very important commentary. Not all of it necessarily I agree with, but I think a lot of it is very true. And certainly in the case of Iran, I made a video about 2 hours ago discussing the obscene, just insane commentary from Trump on his tweet, on his post socials. I've posted it in the comments if you want to watch it. But simply, it's completely unedited. I normally have a bit of a script or something, but I just decided to raw reaction. And I think it's scary because it just reaffirms to me how much Trump is unhinged. we like to think of, well, some people like to claim the MAGA movement, his undying supporters, his cultists almost, because it is a cult of personality at the end of the day. They will never criticize him. He can do no wrong. And I find that very scary, because this is the most powerful man in the world, realistically. He is someone who has access to nuclear weapons. He has unchecked power. Thank God it is America with supposedly a democracy, so he can't just launch the nukes. We hope. But bottom line is this tweet, and I've spoken to people on the right side of the spectrum, the left side, everybody said that this is so uncharacteristic, even for Trump. It is like nothing we've ever seen before in the way that he behaved. The swearing, the expletives, it's literally like someone when they're on the verge of getting into a fist fight, because he just can't control himself. There was no, it's like, maybe, I don't know if you use Twitter, you'll write something and then you're like, maybe I won't send that. Or you've had an emotional argument with a loved one or your girlfriend or boyfriend or something. So you'll write something in rage in the moment, and the red mist, as some people call it, like, and then you'll just be like, I've got to send it. But then you don't do that, because you take a step back and you're like, actually, this might make it worse. I'll add fuel to the fire. Trump didn't do that in that case. He just sent it. And forget allies or adversaries. What I'm fascinated to understand is what his inner circle's thinking. What are the likes of J.D. Vance or those who joined his MAGA movement in the run-up to his election, right? Those who see themselves as the inheritors of this movement, because Trump is 80 and the MAGA movement is going to need a successor. It's going to need someone who inherits it and takes it into the next generation or whatever, the next phase. But J.D. Vance, and I'm not an intricate expert of American politics, but basically he's been pretty quiet. He's been very quiet about this whole conflict, relative to when he's been trumpeting the successes of, I don't know, Venezuela, or he's been trumpeting the comments around Europe and the relationship over NATO or something like that. What I think is fascinating is how quiet and mute he's been, and what that means for his psyche over the movement. Are we going to be able to continue to see the stability of MAGA? Because, to be honest with you, I think there's a pretty big split. You've got the non-interventionists, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, the ones that are truly sort of isolationist, America first, but we don't want to be involved in anything that isn't America. And then you've got this Trump one that I think a lot of people wasn't expecting, which is the interventionist, which is the aggressive, I don't know, use of force, hard power to get what you want. And certainly for Trump, he seems to have completely U-turned or tacoed into thinking that actually it's better to just get involved in the Middle East. A year ago, he wanted to be completely out of the Middle East so he could focus entirely on China, which is why I was chatting with Larry about that at the end, because I think that this goes further. But this idea that sort of invading Iran, taking on Iran, is part of some strategic goal to weaken China in this bigger chess game is complete bollocks. I think it's complete rubbish, because you wouldn't be involved in such a large-scale war with such a resilient opposition, if you like, if you knew that that was the best plan. And Trump's reaction today, I think, is the first expose. It's the first real exposure of just how out of his depth he is. He's running out of options. He doesn't like being told no. He doesn't like getting his way. And he's particularly reacting like this because he has less and less leverage, if he ever had any at all, really, at this point. He has less and less options by which he can pick from to try to force the Iranians to come to the table, or to try to force Europeans to support them in the Strait of Hormuz. And one of the things that we didn't touch on as much as I wanted to with Larry was about this new order. Basically, earlier, just before we went live on the stream, the IRGC has said that they are going to be introducing a new order, that the Strait of Hormuz will never return to what it was before. That the Strait of Hormuz is going to be, completely controlled by them. It's going to be told. We had one guest on the other day who was saying that, it could be turned into an effective toll booth, like the Suez Canal. The difference with that is it's a natural waterway. So I don't know how easy it would be for the Iranians to just do that. But it does seem like they are negotiating with the Omanis, the country just south of the Strait, who have been critical players in negotiations between the United States and Iran in the past, but who the Americans just decided were irrelevant and were caught up in strikes in the first week, I think, of the war. So Iran, I think, rather cleverly is deciding to play its comparative advantage, look like the more responsible power, at least in sort of the international system, whilst Trump goes around trying to use more bombs and aggression. Iran is like, okay, well, we're going to think pragmatically about this, and we're going to negotiate with the surrounding nations about the Strait. What I think is critical is Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, because up until the Operation Epic Fury or whatever occurred, the Saudis and Iranians had been trying to improve relations. I'm quite particular with the words I want to use, because it's not like they were going to be best friends, but I think that there was a growing desire to try to sort of just accept each other as they are and just sort of try to live in coexistence. And the more that this war has gone on, certainly the Gulf states are not happy with the responses by Iran, but equally they've been seriously out of kilter with the Americans. Like, they don't know how to feel. The desire of the Saudis and the Israelis to normalize relations in the Abraham Accords, or sort of whatever expansion of the Abraham Accords, has completely gone out the window. MBS is, from what I understand, very disillusioned with Trump. And one of the questions I did want to chat with Larry about, but he's not so much an economist, is the petrodollar. Because for so long, the United States, the Saudi arrangement, all that has been based on the idea of the petrodollar. And so if you're going to be seeing someone like Trump literally take a torch to so much of what has given America this exorbitant privilege, this unparalleled power as the sort of the global reserve currency, what does that do for that? And how much can China particularly leverage that? Could China somehow persuade or negotiate the Saudis to diversify away? The more you weaponize your currency, the more you weaponize your entire economy, the more that it makes countries want to diversify, de-risk, decouple, and seek alternatives. There's a very interesting meeting that's coming up in Europe in the next week, I think, where 35 or so nations are going to be meeting with the Europeans to discuss sort of the Strait of Hormuz, maritime passages, security. And the US isn't part of that, because Trump doesn't think he needs anyone. And you can agree with the alliance system or not, but the point is that other countries are literally trying to find ways to, circumnavigate, right? Work around the United States. And that's such a different world that we're used to, where the US is the centerpiece, or is often so part of these negotiations, talks, whatever it is, the international system. So for a large group of developed countries, and countries very important to energy and trade and all that, are trying to find a legitimate way to sort of secure the Strait of Hormuz, because Trump's basically saying, not my job anymore, you take care of it. Just show how much the US is being sidelined. Maybe that's what Trump wants, but that only plays into the hands of China, Russia, other powers that want to see a more multipolar or sort of balanced world, not dominated so much by US primacy, by the US hegemon. But ultimately that weakens the United States. And Trump wants to be the person who brings the US together and makes it the most powerful country ever, most respected, and so on. But this is where it goes. Ain't no plan. Yes, that was a misclick, Dave. But yes, ain't no plan. But yeah, I think Larry had a lot of great comments to say. I'm still going to be processing them, and I've been wanting to have him on for a long, long time. So I'm delighted that he was able to join us. And I guess the very last thing I would just say about Trump's tweet is, how far does this go, right? You don't have to support the right. You don't have to support the left. The problem is, though, that if you're unwilling to talk to the other side because of fear of being labeled or disagreeing with someone, you're never going to get anywhere. You're never going to agree with anyone. You're never going to get a solution, right? Trump's demands are so maximalist that the Iranians are simply reciprocating with their own maximalist demands. But if you look at the details, they're actually still not quite as maximalist as the Americans, or at least the Trump administrations are stating. So unless you're willing to find a middle ground and actually listen to the opposing side, to an sense, this is the problem with domestic politics in the US and the UK and much of Europe, much of the West, the polarization that exists. Because if you don't agree with someone, you're labeled as woke left or far right. It just makes people disengage completely and focus on just reaffirming what they already believe. And that's not, I think, a helpful way to go about things. And Trump's rhetoric, his inflammatory words, his just threats are the biggest impediment to all of this. I've said more of this in the actual video, so I recommend you check that out. But lastly, I just also wanted to say that the situation with NATO, whether or not you guys support the alliance or not, Trump's argument has been that, you know, the European countries are useless because they aren't coming to his aid. Now, the United States didn't. Not only did they not consult European countries, they didn't even just warn them. They didn't just say, hey, heads up, this is happening. And yet we will wake up on February 28th, you know, Saturday morning, with major bombings across Iran. And the worst case scenario that so many of us in the world have feared for ages, that this was going to happen. So it's the audacity, the irony for Trump to be like, oh, you guys don't want to help us. No, I don't think we want to get in an illegal war of choice, of aggression, which was completely unnecessary. Now, I personally don't really like the government of Iran. I would prefer the Iranian people to have more choice over their self-determination over their country and future. But the method by the Trump administration and Netanyahu's government to do that is, I think the large majority of people of any reasonable mind agree that it is not the right one. But it's, I think, very powerful to see more and more European nations just outrightly rejecting and just sticking two fingers up, as Churchill would do, perhaps against someone else. But, you know, I think it's great. To be honest with you, the first the Spanish and now the Italians, even the French are doing this, and I think it's beginning to demonstrate that Europe is serious about following through. It's not just holding meetings or gathering to write a written statement. It's still on European time, so this is going to take a long. We'll be here in a couple of months, and probably not much will have changed. But the bottom line is that a year ago, when Trump's administration were making threats and defunded Ukraine or whatever, Europe made it very clear over time that they would be shifting away, and I think that is only going to happen more and more as this war in Iran continues, and as Trump just takes a torch to everything we've taken for granted or benefited or whatever you could say. And the very last point I'd just add is that I think it's very lazy intellectually when people state that because the European Union, the French, the British, whoever it is, are exploring alternative agreements or relationships, not even signed anything, just exploring relationships with the Chinese, with the Indians, whoever it is, other major players, that is somehow they are being forced or capitulated into working with them, right? The Europeans, because they're exploring relationships with the Chinese, that suddenly they're all at the behest of China. That Beijing is controlling Europe. No, that's just called diversification. That's just called intelligent diplomacy. If you can't work with someone who's reckless as Trump, then yeah, you're going to look around for countries that are more reliable. Not necessarily because you agree with them ideologically, but just because you want to trade and get on. And I think in some ways that's what the Iranian government was trying to do with Saudi Arabia. They don't exactly have aligned ideological interests with Riyadh, but they wanted to just get on and try to coexist as best they could. There would probably be disagreements, but China helped broker a rapprochement, this relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran a couple of years ago. And whilst I'm not the biggest fan of China's government, they have been non-interventionist and perhaps slightly more intelligent than the Americans. And I've been talking for so long. My Google Chrome has told me I've reached a time limit. Well, that was interesting. Well, everyone, I'm going to call it there because we've had a fantastic conversation with Larry, who, yeah, me and Larry don't agree on everything, but he knew that, and he was very kind enough to join us for the best part of an hour. So if you haven't already, then do check it out. Trump 2028, yeah, that is not happening. But yeah, everyone, thanks for watching. If you're new to the channel, then do subscribe. We're going to have more of Larry. We're going to have more of some other people, Alex Craner, but also some people who are more establishment, because I think it's important to hear from all sides and to establish our own minds for ourselves. But if you're of Christian faith, and happy Easter. If you're Jewish, then do I say happy Passover? I'm not sure. But yeah, thanks everyone. It's been a great stream, and we'll do it again in a week. Well, hopefully get Larry on in a week, but we'll be back tomorrow with some more content and everything. But otherwise, take care. Cheers.